we push forward the date of the transition to leadership. So those who had put on their track suits and their shoes, their running shoes, all geared for 2030 and were busy running, or geared for 2028, and had marked 2028 on the calendar. We just decided to make them run a little bit longer. They can go up to 2030, and if they still have the stamina to go to 2030, that's very good. The date is very much fixated on the calendar of the party. They can still keep their track shoes and their Nike, their running shoes, their track suits, and they can, if they've got the stamina and of course the determination, they can run a little bit longer than they had supposed. But in the meantime, the party is in safe hands. It is in the safe hands of the current leader, President Idi Mnangagwa. That is the import of Resolution 2030 that was carried out by our conference in Bulawayo. It was endorsed, repeated, reinforced by our conference in Mutare, and it then translated itself into a bill which was which was coming from the originating institution, which is cabinet, which is executive. Then the bill was passed on to Parliament, and our Speaker, Mr. Speaker Mdenda, he published that bill in the Gazette. And then we went through the constitutional processes of the Republic of Zimbabwe in Parliament, and we did all the due consultations under the auspices of the Zimbabwe Constitution all over the country. And there was this resonance by the populace of the country to the call by the party leadership, by the party membership, to say the tenure of the president must be extended beyond 2028. And it ended up, of course, as a bill before Parliament, unanimously passed with overwhelming support. Surprise, surprise, even from the opposition. We almost got 96, 97% of the vote which is required, in the Senate, and an equally pleasing number, beyond 2/3 majority in the lower house in Parliament. And the Senate saw it fit to revisit some of the clauses which had been overlooked by our Parliament, and that is the role of the two houses. One has got oversight over the other, and the bill went back to Parliament, and last week it passed again. So it's now awaiting the signature of the President, who incidentally under Constitution is very much manacled to support that resolution. If he has got some misgivings, he can point them out. He can return the bill to the two houses to consider. But should those two houses feel that what they deliberated upon is the right way to go, the president has got no alternative but to assent to the bill as is original. We do hope that since it has already been sent back to Parliament, to lower house, there may not be that need for the president to send it back again. But if it is, it's his prerogative, it's a provision of the Constitution, but his hands are pretty much tied. I want to make it very clear, under the Constitution, the president is pretty much obliged to assent to the bill as it is. So we are now safely in safe territory, in sure territory, from the point of leadership, from the point of certainty, from the point of stability. Things come from nowhere, and the second topic which I will be delving with will highlight to you, will pinpoint to you the vagaries which can arise out of unforeseen circumstances, especially in the fledgling republics of Southern Africa, where the geopolitical interests of those who used to be rulers is still very much alive, but also where maybe even historical tendencies of certain backward ideas may still want to latch and interfere with the revolutionary processes which we went through, in particular in the 60s and 70s, but which pretty much harked back to about 1910 when modern nationalist politics started in Southern Africa. So this was a week of a very eventful week in terms of both party politics, national engagement, and institutional oversight in what we are doing. I mean, institutional engagement and national oversight in what we are doing. The bill CAB 3 passed last week, and the people of Zimbabwe can rest easy again that 2028 is no longer a date of anxiety for them. They can go back to their usual work, hard work, which has revived this economy in the last 7 to 8 years in ways which nobody had ever foreseen could happen. And that steady hand of the president, the man who has turned the fortunes of this country, which had no currency, the country which had empty coffers, the country which had was begging for food, the country which had no exports, the country which everybody was hoping was relishing would be a failed state. No, that he has turned it around, and it has made the shrill messages of Ana Chamisa become even more dissonant. Nobody wants to listen to what they are saying now. He's coming out of the woodwork, seizing upon every misadventure which may happen within the sub-region to try to see whether he can claw back and get some credence. No, we are not going to allow it. We, Zanu PF, we are very much attuned to what our people want, and as our young people say, takashibata kuti dri, hatisi kuzombocheregeraba chinichi, takashibata kuti dri. So certainty, stability under President E.D. Mnangagwa as the helmsman of Zanu PF is very much the tenor of the day. If there are those who, like I say, those who still want to have ambition, it's allowed. That's why they are politicians. Any engagement in politics presupposes ambition. Nothing wrong with it. But please exercise your ambition with due respect to what the democratic will of the people has done. Because we expect ambition to be aligned to democracy. The call is that those with ambition respect the current leader, because he has passed all the tick boxes of renewed legitimacy until 2030 from within the party. So, and if you've got some good ideas which you think are burning very much and which you want to see applied to the national economic management, so be it. Write your notes, give them to the president so that he takes due cognizance of your ideas, and you can see how they can be factored into what he is doing to run the country. What we would not be happy with is, of course, to try to challenge his leadership in ways which do not respect the fact that a democratic process has been discharged and his tenure has been prolonged, and his legitimacy has been ensured in every aspect. If you respect that, we expect that your ambition will be aligned to those realities. Let it not be deviant to that reality which has just transpired until 2020, until we get to 2030. So there was a very big celebratory mood both in the Politburo, not only both, in all the three institutions, the Politburo, the Central Committee, and the National Consultative Assembly last week. We are very happy as a party, and the mood was jubilant in this war. Some of you who came to cover it, you could see it, you could touch. The atmosphere was palpable with excitement, because we feel that as an experienced revolutionary party, we know how to dodge bullets of those who may want to upstage or upend our processes in order to hijack them for other purposes. We have made sure that our leadership is intact and the custodianship of the president of the party is unchallenged. by anybody. That's the main item I wanted to announce today, because we didn't have a press conference last week. The second item is that we, like I said, we are a party which is very much vigilant and alive to the unexpected. Pressure has been building up in South Africa for some time. It's historical pressure. A lot of it stems from the basic law of the uneven development of societies. Human beings, human society over the last 5,000, 6,000 years of modern civilization, we make uneven progress. Some countries, some societies, they streak ahead of others and others remain behind. And that's why, Africa was at one time the cradle of civilization, writing in Egypt, and when Europe was still very much behind. Then, of course, the wheel turns in different ways. And by the 19th century, 18th, 19th century, the Renaissance comes to Europe. Europe becomes the center of the world industrial revolution. And it makes more advances in science, in manufacturing, in almost every aspect of human endeavor, in global trade, especially after the Portuguese and the Iberian Peninsula. Spain went to America, and Vasco da Gama went to the Indian Ocean. So Europe went ahead. And one unexpected and very unfortunate turn of that was Europe became very imperial. It used the advantage of capital advances to become empire builders in very ruthless manner against other continents which did not have the weapons which they advanced to, especially the gun, in particular the Maxim gun, the machine gun from the 19th century. Hiram Maxim invented the modern machine gun. It could fire bullets at the rate of 12 infantry people from one gunner. And that gun would play havoc. Even the loss of our armies in the 19th century is because of the Maxim gun. Rhodes used it to devastating effect against, first against Gouveia, who was from the Zambezi Valley, Goanese Portuguese, who was mostly involved in trading and selling guns and making African chiefs have modern weapons. He was defeated in 1892, and later, of course, Lobengula would be defeated. Then the Shona in two wars, the Ndebeles were defeated in 2 wars, and then the Shonas were defeated in 1896 and 97 because of this gun, the Maxim gun, and dynamite. Dynamite was invented, and you couldn't ride behind caves. They were dynamited by the pioneer column. So this period where Europe becomes the slave trader, empire builder, I was citing our own case, but the Atlantic slave trade is a crime against humanity. And we are very happy that the United Nations has so recognized it as a crime against humanity in a resolution this year. So this uneven development of societies was accentuated by unfair allocation of capital in Southern Africa, where South Africa and Rhodesia, white South Africa and Rhodesia, because they were white and capital was coming from Europe. At that time, Europe was the major center of capital. That's what I was building up to when I told you about the uneven development of societies. So London, New York, Frankfurt, Paris, Milan, they all became centers of capital, and they preferred to give societies where white people had gone abroad on behalf of European imperialism and settled in other countries. They gave them capital to make those strong outposts of Europe in Africa. And South Africa and Rhodesia got an unfair share of capital vis-a-vis all other African countries. That's why our infrastructure in Southern Africa was at a higher level. Capital is the drive of modern development. If you don't have capital, forget about trying to make it. Capital makes a difference. So Africa was denied capital, Southern Africa was given capital. And we were eventually forced, my generation, to fight in order to address the entrenched nature of these regimes in Southern Africa, which had benefited from strong states, a strong army and potent armies because of unfair advantage of access to capital. Now, the result is that labor also follows capital. You go where there are jobs. And from the 1920s onwards, there is movement of labor in the region to go to the gold mines of South Africa, to go to the diamond mines of Kimberley, and also the whole infrastructure to support that gold mining industry in South Africa begets a very advanced industrial society, which makes everybody go to South Africa for jobs, to go to Rhodesia for jobs. There was a company called Wenera. It was a company recruiting all the way up to Namibia, up to Congo, up to Malawi, taking people to go to South Africa to go to the jobs. And equally here in Zimbabwe, Wenera used to bring laborers from Malawi. You may want to know that originally Salisbury, Nationally, and Mavuku, there was a very big number of expatriate Malawians. The name Banda would be, when you go to school, for boarding school, Malawi names were there because they were exposed to the labor mobility and the modern access to facilities of capital, whilst our people who had lost were still sulking from having lost in 1896. They were not that keen to go and work for white people, these local Zimbabwe people. So the Malawians came in. So this issue of mobility of labor to South Africa, it must not be politicized. It's historical. It owes, of course, to that period. Unfortunately, as we became independent, we have this burden from the past. And the only way it can be addressed is that we should attract capital in dollops, in big chunks, into the region, so that the resources which are distributed all over the region can be exploited in the various national jurisdictions or where we are. Then people remain in where they are, or even if they move, they are moving where opportunities are arising and ebbing as capital exploits the capacity of the region, so that we do not create pressures where poverty is weaponized the way it has now been done in South Africa. We have poor people coming from all over Africa, including from Zimbabwe, of course, going to seek opportunities in South Africa because of the superior level of exposure to capital. And then there's also the aspirations of the poor people in South Africa themselves, who say, well, this is our home country. Now we've got everybody coming into our home turf. Maybe these people should have what's happening to their homes. So then there are nefarious elements who then weaponize that poverty between the poor to start antagonizing and creating a situation where they finger pointed each other. So the border now is teeming. This is an unexpected situation, which, although it was building, the level at which it is, the twist at which it is taking, is one where the governments need to rise to this new challenge. And our president, I told you that a couple of weeks ago, was meeting President Cyril. It was to see how we can create value chains within the region, so that we can, first of all, make it very safe for capital, because what's happening in South Africa, it scares capital. How do you have your industries when workers whom you have trusted are suddenly said they cannot be in South Africa? You can see the dislocation even from the point of the companies which are in South Africa. But then the companies cannot do much because there is this pressure which is coming from the grassroots level of weaponized poverty, where poverty is now weaponized to make poor fight against poor. This is a challenge which we have to face, and we are very happy as a party that, no, we are relieved as a party that we have a common history, particularly from the 1960s and 70s when we as a region fought together. We think this is a challenge which the National Liberation Movement must rise up to, the way it rose against settler and white domination. And a couple of weeks ago, the president was consulting with one of the young men from South Africa who has got very good connections with the traditional rulers in Zululand and in Xhosa, the Amapondo, the Xhosas and the Zulus. This is where, there's a lot of groundswell about weaponized poverty being used against each other, to see whether, the traditional leadership in those regions can come in to help us now deal with this situation which is unfolding on the ground. Because Africa, we are one. Yeah, we have always been, we have faced our challenges as one, particularly as national liberation movements. So we are bringing in that element where it's not only at government-to-government level, like I'm talking about, but also at culture, at historical level. And the president has received some correspondence from these kingdoms. The king of Zululand, the king of the Amapondos is also involved. The Xhosa paramount king Damasi is also involved. They would want to see what could be done at a sub-regional level to find ways where we address this very difficult and emotive issue about shrinking opportunities where capital is not made inroads into the region as fast as the labor market has done. Labor has moved ahead of capital. Capital is the one which gives opportunities, but labor is now ahead of capital. And the competition for limited opportunities, for limited jobs, is now causing so much friction, which makes the idea of African solidarity look, at least in terms of the news, look like it is a misnomer. Well, it should really be the truth. And I'm happy with the president meetings with these emissaries from the South African traditional kings. Prince Sivile Mabandla, he met President Mnangagwa, and the correspondence is now going on between Zimbabwe. They are looking at our president because of his institutional memory and the respect which he has gathered on the sub-regional diplomatic landscape, but also the weight which he's carrying in African diplomacy on the global stage. You saw how we performed in New York when we were being voted in the Security Council. There is the respect for Zimbabwe is back because of what our president has been doing. So there is a feeling by these traditional rulers from South Africa that they want to ride on our president to look at ways which diffuse this situation which is unfolding. But more important, we want to create a region where capital can come in huge volumes so that we can unleash the capabilities of this very well endowed region. We are in a transition in terms of mobility from the fossil fuel. All these cars which you are seeing on the road, the engines are made from petrol and diesel. It's only a matter of months away before they will probably be swept away by electric vehicles. It's happening now. I don't know whether you've noticed that in this town there are a lot of new showrooms of vehicles, of brand names which you have never seen before, mostly from China. China has taken the lead. I think more than 60% of the cars, more than 50% of the cars in China now are now electric. Singapore, it's almost 60 to 70%. That trend is going. Canada has joined. You know, at one time America was trying to resist the march of fossil fuel, of electric cars against fossil fuels. Now, this paradigm shift it's akin to the previous movement from the animal draft to the steam engine. Now, then the steam engine gave in to the diesel and the electric engine. Now we are going to the electric battery. And this is also that moves, you know, in terms of technological development. So Southern Africa is uniquely placed in that most of the critical minerals which are vital for the mobility from fossil fuel to the new electric energy batteries, even just electric storage, they're in Southern Africa. And I will run down, I've done it before. Zimbabwe has got 25% of the world hard rock lithium reserves. You see what it has already done to our economy. You know, go to Goromonzi, go to Bikita, you see huge smelting factories processing lithium on a scale which Southern Africa, global South, had never known before. You can see the huge investment going into cobalt in the DRC. 70% of the world cobalt passes from DRC through Zimbabwe to the ports in Mozambique and South Africa. These two metals are the ones which power this battery, your mobile phone. It's the same battery which powers the new vehicles on a bigger scale. Then there's graphite in Mozambique. The biggest graphite mines in the world are in Mozambique. It's one of the metals again in these batteries. Then there's nickel. You know, Tanzania has become very big in nickel. And right now Madagascar is following on hard on the heels. This is the third metal of the battery: nickel, cobalt, and lithium. These are the major minerals which are powering. So then there's manganese. South Africa has got 80% of the world manganese, and vanadium. These are and then the copper, which makes all these batteries and the cars move around because they've got to conduct electricity. Zambia and DRC have got 40% of the world copper. These are huge investments which are going on, you know, into these countries. So the opportunities are there for our region to play a crucial role in the paradigm shift of global mobility from fossil to electric, akin to what has happened with fossil fuels in the Middle East. All the wars you see in the Middle East now, they center around petrol and diesel and petroleum and natural gas. That's why the Americans are attacking Iran. So we are now the next stage of global mobility in Southern Africa. So if we put our act together as a region, there is really no reason why there should be this strife about opportunities of labor mobility in the region, because we've got everything going to make us become a world focal player in energy mobility, in new energy and mobility and storage. So these are the issues which the president has been seized with and we are expecting that his quiet consultations which are going on now. You know, he's a man who likes to do his things in a quiet way, in a furtive manner. We don't believe that we need to be shouting against each other, enjoying the bandwagon or finger pointing at each other. That doesn't provide the solutions. And you heard it today when we were burying the national hero, my former director, when I was Minister of War Veterans Affairs. The general who was buried today, he was my director. The president used that occasion to give an appreciation of what he's doing about our own situation of returnees. And the numbers are beginning to pile up. And I think Cabinet tomorrow will have to be sitting, all indications from the president's speech that our Cabinet will be sitting in emergency tomorrow to create what is essentially, to address what would be equivalent to a manifold situation of disaster, as Zimbabweans are turned off plantations in Cape Town, in Western Cape, in Eastern Cape, but also in Zululand. A lot of Zimbabweans are coming into the border, but not only Zimbabweans, a lot of Malawians We are the transit country to which they will be going, but there are those who also come from further afield. They will be passing through Zimbabwe. So it is a situation which is painful. It is a situation which needs sober heads, but it is also a situation which now requires that some of the economic imperatives which we have been talking about acquire a new agency, the Africa Free Continental Trade Area. This is the answer of a single African market which makes it possible for capital to come into Africa, into Southern Africa, at a scale which has never happened before. Because only then can we be able to address this issue by rewarding our people with prosperity where they are, but allowing them to move around the region where prosperity is uneven without friction, because we are in a shared cake about where we are going as a sub-region. At home, we have seen what capital can do in the last 7 years. The previous administration was against capital. I know because I was in Mugabe's government. And one of the reasons why I fell out with him was this ignorant approach to what capital can do to change a modern country. I'm a Marxist. I believe in capital. He didn't quite believe in capital. There was indigenization and all these other things which were really meant to make sure that we remain like monkeys, superintending over resources which are not being exploited because they are ours. These resources are underground and they are not being dug and made processed to become part of the global value chain of human progress, of human industrialization. Then you might as well we could as well be monkeys or wild animals keeping those resources. We are human beings. We need to exploit our resources so that we create better conditions of living for ourselves. So this is the departure of the current president from the previous administration. And you can see the way with his mantras, Zimbabwe is open for business. We are friend to all, enemy to none. He wants capital to come. And this is why there's a new spring in Zimbabwean step as we walk, because capital it frees up your capabilities. You suddenly become confident of yourself because of the products which you are producing, which have got a global demand. This gives you a sense of pride about who we are. That's where the president comes in. So that template which Zimbabwe is given to the region is the one which we want to sell. You see, there was previously the perception that only white associated industrial entities can build blast furnaces to produce steel. So the South Africa was now looked as if it is, this is Mecca about the capabilities of white people. Zimbabwe has changed that. Now they can't produce steel as good as we do. And this is an African country, post-independent. This is good. They are building huge battery factories in Richards Bay in South Africa. They are going to get their lithium from Zimbabwe, process the lithium from Zimbabwe, South Africa. This is a country post-independent, 40 years into independence, which is now showing that on the world stage we can produce world-class goods made in Zimbabwe for the global market. Our lithium is world-class. Our steel is world-class. So we are also beginning to give South African whites a new appreciation of what their fellow African brethren, whom they were meant to despise during the apartheid racist days, they can now see brains have no racial barrier, capacity, gray matter has no racial barrier. If Zimbabwe can do it, if we can produce steel this, just like or better than them, it's good. It shows that we can contribute to the general wealth of the region. So some of the retrograde ideas which are carrying over from apartheid years, they are being knocked off their pedestals in South Africa. And our hope is that those of our white stock in South Africa, especially the Afrikaners, who we consider Africans, they consider themselves Africans too, they call themselves Afrikaners. They've been on the continent for a long time. They've profited from proximity to capital. They've made outreaches on the global stage and produced brilliant people like Elon Musk. They come from this sub-region. Why can't they identify again with the region which gave them the education, which gave them the opportunity to go where they are today? And you know, he's a leader in space, he's a leader in electric vehicles, and we are talking of all these resources there in his home territory. Why should, I mean, we don't mind Chinese coming to exploit, to help us exploit. We don't mind Indians coming, Turkish coming, but we also be very proud if our own stock of capable entrepreneurs can also be part of the game, because this is their home. You know, so instead of probably trying to instigate false migration stories about Afrikaners being victimized in South Africa, why not create a positive image? And one of the things which our president is being asked, which is also promoting, is possibly a summit in Victoria Falls, which addresses all the issues which militate towards Southern Africa being seen as an ideal investment destination for capital, because we want world-class capital to come to Southern Africa. So a summit which can address the issue of whites as minorities, Jews as minorities, Anglo-Saxons as minorities, you know, minorities amongst ourselves, you know, why, you know, among Africans, why the San, you know, the Himbas or the Twas in DRC, or the issues between Rwanda, the Tutsi and the Hutu thing. This thing about minority being seen as a source of friction, we want to disband with it so that we present an Ubuntu, one personality in Africa. And out of that one personality, we create big markets. 1.4 billion Africans is a big market. Then we can talk up to India. Then we can talk up to China. Because they've got big populations, these countries, and they are streaking ahead. Because they've got the advantage of big populations. They can leverage their big populations because they did something good to be so huge in their populations. So Africa, already we have that population, but we are disjointed. We need to come together. And what's happening in South Africa is the corollary, is the opposite of where we should be going. But this is because of the historical circumstances which made us be where we are to. And the only way we can address those historical anomalies is by having capital, technology, management expertise, science permeate throughout the whole region, so that we then become a big market amongst ourselves, a big market on the global stage, and we produce world-class goods made for the global market. So this summit in Victoria Falls, we hope that it will also get the support of some of the biggest companies on the African continent, particularly South African companies. I mean, how would you like to be MTN? I give an example. You're operating in Uganda, you're operating in Nigeria, you're operating in Ghana, you're operating in Zambia and Mozambique, and you are being said you're a South African company, and your country where you come from, they don't like black people, other African people. They are Afrophobic, and you are the CEO of that company. You know, how do you feel? You know, you are making your money in all these African jurisdictions, yet now you are being accused that your home territory where you come from cannot tolerate other Africans. These are not good things from corporate politics, corporate social responsibility, corporate image. But these are our African champions, these companies. These are our champions on the African continent. So we want that positive aspect about them to be projected, and they are very much looking at supporting this idea of a summit which rides upon what Zimbabwe has done, you know, post-independence. Remember, here we had challenges about all this population from Malawi, from Mozambique, from Zambia with independence. But we said, when we were fighting, everybody supported the war. Now we are free. Do we now tell them to go back to their countries and say we are not Zimbabweans? No. So all of them, we gave them citizenship. We don't even, I mean, can you point in your area where it comes, who is a Malawian, who is a Mozambican, or who is a Zambian? You don't even know. We are all the same. So that template which Zimbabwe used at independence, we think it is the best, and it is also the one which our South African leadership, political leadership, traditional leadership, and even historical leadership. They want to ride upon the Zimbabwean template so that we can address the issues about a shared African identity where prosperity is pervasive and where capital comes in from America, from China, from India, from Brazil, from Turkey. Capital should come and ride upon especially our young population. We have the youngest population in the world as a continent. This is a vitality which you can no longer find in mature societies like Japan or Europe where the people are aging. So this is an African dividend which needs to be exploited upon. So these are the issues which the president has been seized upon. I told you that is now this steady certain leadership which he has been given under the CAB 3 mandate. He is now seeing it as a pedestal upon which we can now use this new vitality from Zimbabwe to create a common identity with fellow Africans, so that we promote the idea of a shared Ubuntu, and we also project to the world a continent which is not associated with tribal, ethnic strife, tribal disputes, national wars, internecine civil wars. The guns must, like the president always says, we want to silence the guns. That is the way Africa can address the issues which are happening in South Africa today. So we pooh-hoo when people like Chamisa grandstand and try to take advantage of a very unsavory situation for political for purposes. No, that is not the way to go. We want solutions which are holistic, which leaves everybody with his pride, which forgives when mistakes have been taken, because we are fellow Africans, and which rides upon those things which make us be what we are as an African identity. This is I also just want to make, last week I had the pleasure of being invited to SAPES. One of our celebrated heroes, a lawyer, everybody of course remembers Ebed Chitepo. There was equally a very, very youthful lawyer who was involved in urban politics and the rise of African nationalism in Zimbabwe. His name was Edson Sitole. I know him because when I went to the university, I was the top national student. I was in the law department where only 7 Africans. There was a feeling that Africans could not study law, so I was with Paddington Garwe, the late George James in Bulawayo. I was also in Sandra Ngwira, and I was also with Eric Martinenga, though he went the other way, I went the other way. I went to the comradeship, he went the other way. So Edson used to address us at university as the top lawyer, very smart mind. But somehow, along the way, I think he got involved with General Tongogara in setting up Zanla forces in the northeast in a, of course, clandestine way. And unfortunately, that's when the Selous Scouts broke away as a wing of the Rhodesian army, which was answering to London, because the British wanted the Selous Scouts to do dirtier things about fighting the nascent guerrilla army of Zanla and Zipra. So they wanted an arm's length plausible deniability about nasty things which the Selous Scouts were going to do against Africans. And I think Edson got caught up at that period. The Selous Scouts fingered him as a collaborator of Tongogara with a camp called Chimbi Chimbi. I wasn't in the war at that time in Zambia, where Edson would send people to quickly train across the Zambezi River and be deployed back, instead of going through Botswana and spending some time. Then the Rhodesians would follow that somebody had left school or had left the job and can no longer be identified. Edson and Tongogara had this collaborative relationship. And because of that, Edson was kidnapped and he disappeared, and there's no record of what happened to him in September, I think October 1975. That was a few months after I had already gone to the war in Mozambique. When I went to war, we went to ask him, he said, there's a good structure, though. You can leave university, you can go and join Zanu forces because there is a structure which is outside. So he gave us the comfort to know that we were going to be received by an army which already existed on the ground. And I think because of those things, Edson was fingered by the Selu scouts, and they then tortured him and he disappeared from history. So Sapes was hosting his son, was there, his only son, who was born 3 months after the father was kidnapped. And there was I think Dr. Doran or something who had written a book about Edson. And I went there because I wanted to make sure that some of these National Liberation War heroes, they are not appropriated by those who feel that they are always in opposition to Zanu PF. I wanted to show them that when there is somebody who deserves national recognition and we cluster around that person, it doesn't matter which political rubric you come under. So I went to Ibos Mandaza's place. Incidentally, Ibom was my teacher at Kutama, before I went to war. So I know him very well. It is an event, and we want that book to be given as much publicity as it can, but also from that book, this is somebody from outside. I think this is somebody from America writing about this book. We want more Zimbabweans to write about their story, about this very difficult period of our national liberation war. But if you can buy that book, it will be a good thing. It gives you an appreciation of where we come as a people, as a nation, and as a sub-region, and also as part of the world humanity. So this is, in short, what I wanted to tell you about today, the celebration about our win with CAB 3, but the promise which it gives in terms of certainty and stability at a time when we are having these challenges coming from this shock from South Africa about the reactions of labor mobility going ahead of capital injection into the sub-region, and then making our people be weaponized in the scramble for the shrinking cake of opportunities. Because this is what is the issue really. These are other things which everybody tries to talk about, blaming this one, blaming that. They are neither here, they are symptoms, but the fundamental issue is what I've talked about, and what our president is applying himself to. And we are hoping that America will respond, China will respond, India will respond when we possibly successfully bring about a summit at Victoria Falls, which our president will chair, to see how capital can come into Africa in quantities which are such that they can give opportunity to the young population of Africa. And the template exists. China has shown it. 40 years ago, China is not where it is today. But in almost every index now, China is now showing that you can grow your economy without causing wars against other people and still deliver prosperity to the world. If China can do it in 30, 40 years, Africa could do it in shorter years if we work together closely. And this is the vision of our president. Remember, he's a young man who goes around Africa becoming the pioneer of an army which didn't exist, which was there to address what the Maxim Gun had done in the 1890s in Zimbabwe. Now he was addressing it by going around Africa saying, can you train me so that I can go and fight home? And he is a lucky survivor of that generation, with that institutional memory of what Africa did to Zimbabwe to give us one of the most competent armies, Anadziwema, these young people. You could not have even thought that we could have a major general with so much accolades coming from this country when we were growing up, because the army was white and racist. Now it's ours, and now it can defend our people. Now it can make us be very proud. This is what our presidents, we are lucky to have a man with such institutional memory covering such a wide span of knowledge about what Africa has achieved in the last 6 to 7 decades. So we want to ride upon that wisdom, and that's what his colleagues in the region are also riding upon in the region. And that's what we also want other races, even those which may have enjoyed privilege, like the Afrikaners, the Jews, the Anglo-Saxons, who are now part of our community. We now want them to say we can build shared societies where prosperity is something which is not identified by race, by creed, by color, or by religion. That's what we want, and that's what our president stands for. So with this new mandate from CAB 3, we see we are praying hard to see more of the same man who has delivered such wonders to Zimbabwe in the last 7 years. And that man is President E.D.M. Emerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa. E.D. delivers. I want to thank you. And I am ready for any questions. Don't shy away from any questions. I am ready for them.
Yes, your name and media house. Sorry?
I'm not hearing you properly. Sorry, I also was a little bit distracted. Can you give, where's my guy? Can you give him the microphone, because we don't want you to be shrill.
No.
This one. Give it to him so that everybody can hear.
Yes, I'm asking concerning this proposed summit in Victoria Falls. I wanted to be able to unpack more about it. Is it going to be a regional summit where we've started leaders discussing issues, opportunities about how to grow our economies in Africa, or is it going to involve the whole continent, or on a global scale where we also invite capital investors themselves?
Yeah. I can answer? You can hear me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, with this one. Yeah, you see, because of this, the way things are unfolding now, we are groping for but with a heightened sense of urgency as to how exactly the nature it is going to take. But the beauty about it is that the traditional chiefs from where the turmoil is coming from, those from Zululand and from Mapondo, from the Xhosas, they are the ones who have reached out to our president. So it's a good beginning. The second thing is that the president of South Africa, because you can see they are in a between a rock and a hard place. On one hand, they've got a domestic population which feels that opportunities are being denied to it. But on the other hand, they have got obligations to an African population which has gone to their countries for economic reasons. They are not going there because they just want to be in South Africa. It's for economic opportunities. So, for them, they've got to work on political eggs as leaders of South Africa at national level. That's why they are now saying we need to look at it in the same way we approached the National Liberation Movement in the 1960s and 70s, when we all came together. And the leader whom they are seeing as the one with the longest institutional memory about developments in Southern Africa is our president, E.D. Mnangagwa. That's why they are now sending consultations to him, sending emissaries to him. Like I told you, Mr. Mabanda, we also had the chiefs from the vendors from South Africa. Remember, President Cyril is from northern provinces of South Africa. They were here, they were in Harare, because it's also, it's not right for them to be seen as chiefs of people who are against other Africans. It is not good for their image. But they realize the pressures which are driving this. And the pressure is real about economic opportunity, which then makes it a global issue. Yeah, that's why now we have to think about which are the regions with excess capital Just like in the 1970s, in the colonial period, in the imperial period, Europe had excess capital. It gave an advantage to its white settler populations in Southern Africa, which Africa did not enjoy. So we are now looking at a world where capital is more democratic. You don't no longer, you can go to New York as much as you can go to Shanghai. You can go to Frankfurt as much as you can go to Mumbai. You can go to Seoul as much as you can go to Milan. This is the way the world, there's abundance of capital, but there's also the big markets, the growing middle classes of Asia, which are big consumers. They want goods from Africa. And so this is the opportunity where we are saying a more coalesced world where Africa puts its best image, its best foot forward, and removing some of these things, these images we are seeing on television. Because who in the world wants to put his money where children are being chased out of their homes because they are considered foreigners? It has never happened. Who wants to put his money? So it's not even good for South Africa itself, as a country. So, that's why the situation is not that easy, but it requires wise, tempered, and seasoned leadership. And this is where President Mnangagwa is being seen by all his colleagues, but also by the traditional chiefs from this region. You saw what he did with our situation of Bukhara, and everyone wanted to politicize it. But at the end of the day, people who died belong to chiefs. People who have to be compensated belong to chiefs. So when we reached out and used that template in Matebele, we achieved more mileage than shouting on behalf of Koltat, on behalf of BT, on behalf of Kwakazi and all these things. This grandstanding without producing a solution, but going to, using the capabilities of the African society, all the attributes of the African society. We want to mine them and bring them on board so that we can have a situation where not only the countries, the sub-region, but Africa can become a preferred destination of capital, because only capital can bring the prosperity which addresses these problems. Without capital, forget it. We'll continue to be, we'll sink more and more into poverty. We'll sink more into reclamations. We'll sink more into internecine strife, because the opportunities are shrinking. We need to open up, and there's a window of opportunity being offered by the fact that there's a paradigm shift in global energy use from fossil fuels to the critical minerals I mentioned, which are abundant in Southern Africa. So it's inevitable that capital will want to come to Southern Africa, given a stable, accommodating situation. That's what the president is being canvassed. That's what the president is responding to as we deal with this situation, which is tragic, but ultimately needs a solution, a positive solution of creating prosperity for the region, for the continent, and for the societies from where these people spring up from. For creating a huge market, a huge continental market, so that capital can thrive. Because capital is the only way to address the challenges which we are facing right now. And that's why we are also appealing to the traditional, successful communities. We don't want to call them minorities. We may call them minorities, the Anglo-Saxons in South Africa. They came, the Afrikaners in South Africa. We want them to be much on board. The Jews in South Africa. We all want them on board. And we don't want them to used to fight wars about Israel versus Palestine and taking to the ICJ. Then they feel ostracized from society. No, that may be an Israeli thing. But for a Jewish point of view, we want to see them as minorities in Southern Africa. They belong, regardless of the politics of Israel. These are the issues which our president is grappling with as he's being approached, but also as he's reaching out. So it's a cross-fertilization of ideas. We are not saying he's the one with the panacea to all these things. No. He's just one with whom they are saying he's got the repository of institutional memory of how we have worked with each other for so many years. Remember, the National Liberation Movement starts in South Africa in 1910 with the ANC. That's where the National Liberation Movement starts from. It goes up north by the time it goes back to the south, Samora Machel is now a militant. It has taken an armed dimension, a revolutionary armed dimension. But it's not with, we can't forget that it came from South Africa originally. It went up north, went and hatched and became bigger, and came back to the region as the Revolutionary National Liberation Movement. So these are the attributes of our history which they see as being deposited in our president's institutional memory. So it's a big task for him. It's not a mean task, but he's methodical, he's applying, he's listening, he's getting ideas from all over. And possibly by the time we get to Victoria Falls, the corporate interest from our regional companies will be of such a scale that it will be a resounding success. But we also want to use them as a mezzanine to reach out to global companies so that Africa can get capital in quantities commensurate to its resources, in quantities commensurate to its population, including the dynamism of a very young population. A lot of Africans are below 25 years of age. They deserve a good future. And how do they get that future? By having more capital come to Africa, so that Africa can produce goods which can compete on the global market like any other region. That's when we can address these issues which are arising from the imperfections of the colonial period which we inherited. I hope I answer your question. Thank you.
Your name and media house. Sorry?
Thank you, Ambassador, for what you do us. I just need to ask you if there are any prospects of engaging some of the elements or the characters behind the March and March movement, in as far as the engagement to chiefs has been done. Are there any prospects of engaging those founders of a so-called March and March movement? Because in South Africa, I think they also engaged the chiefs. But however, the June 30 deadline, when it comes, the shutdown also has become successful. So I need to know if there are any prospects amongst the strategies in terms of engaging Jacinta Ngobese Zuma and some of her colleagues in addressing the towing relations between Limpopo and Harare as well as their citizens. And at what cost do you expect this process would be implemented? Thank you very much.
Look, remember, South Africa is still an independent country. It has got its own governance, its national jurisdictions. So, much as we may have certain views about how certain things should be handled, it's still very much a national question for South Africans. And we really don't, much as they've been shaken or are being shaken, we still believe that there's a capability by the South African government to deal with this situation. So we don't want to ask to be seen to be intrusive into the internal politics of South Africa. But when they reach out to us, like I say, Chief Ndamase of the Amapondo, I think, of the Xhosas, and Misi Zulu of the Zulus, and the other chief of the paramount chiefs, and so they've reached out. We then can come in, because it is coming we are only responding at their own volition. When President Cyril Ramaphosa sends his special representative to Zimbabwe, Benji Chauke, he's a special advisor to Zimbabwe. And when President Mnangagwa sends some of the well-connected young South Africans, like I told you, Sivile Mabandla, to them, we are using the systems which are in place. We are not trying to we cannot be prescriptive. This is a situation where one cannot be prescriptive. But there's also consultations going on with the Afrikaners, because they are a very active, economically active group in South Africa. And sometimes they carry over certain elements, would want to stir the pot in the old tradition of divide and rule, fighting old wars of the apartheid and racist era. We try to disabuse of them to say, no, that is not the way to go. Use your energies in a positive manner, because they've been privileged to have had this economic success when everybody else was being denied. That's why we are saying to people like Elon Musk, you are now in America, at the center of capital, the number one center of global capital. Use your access, which comes from being educated and brought up from this region, in a positive manner, so that we can address these issues, and the rewards for you will be good. Why can't your cars be powered by the minerals from Southern Africa, which you are helping to exploit? You are a trillionaire, you raise $1 trillion through your companies. This region needs capital, Elon. Why can't you use your pedestal where you are now to make this region be seen in a positive now? Because if it could give birth to somebody like you, educate him to where you are, so that it becomes such a global success, there surely must be something good about where you came from, which you can ride upon. So these are the things which we are talking about. Our president, he's a seasoned politician. He doesn't want to operate from the bull pulpit. He wants to do things, and he wants to carry everybody along, and he also wants to be carried along by everybody, if I can put it that way. That's what. So I hope it answers you. We can't be sanctimonious. People, we are smart, we are this, we are this. Oh, you are that, you are that. It doesn't. Finger pointing at this stage is not the way to address, because this is a situation which will determine the destiny of Africa. We have to reverse what happened at 1884 in Berlin Conference. And maybe this is now the opportunity to do so. When we were marginalized completely by the Europeans in 1884, we need to refine ourselves so that we are back on the global stage. And we have this opportunity because of this paradigm shift in energy consumption. It gives us an opportunity. Never history will accord us again, because fortune favors the prepared. Fortune favors the prepared. We need to be prepared for this. If we miss it, we go back to where we were when Europe went into the Industrial Revolution, and we paid a very heavy price with slavery, colonialism, subjugation, resource theft, resource depredation, land theft. This is what we suffered. We cannot allow it to happen again. I hope I answer you. I'm happy I have not been asked the Nyadzekundarinas. And by the way, I don't. Oh, okay.
Your name and media house.
Thank you very much. My name is Shalin Mohammed. I write for Nature and Men. Ambassador, in your presentation, you spoke about strengthening Africa's value chains. I wanted to find out what practical role do you see Zimbabwe playing in regional value addition as well as industrialization?
Yes, we surprised many. We surprised many. I already cited 2 instances. We used to have a steel plant in this country. It came from the colonial. It was called Zisco. It started off as Risco. The reason why Risco was started by the British was to make Rhodesia strong in the face of African nationalism, because they knew that the United Nations and the world were going to ostracize Rhodesia. So the most important commodity of ostracism is steel. Steel to nations is what food is to human beings. If you don't have steel, forget it. You cannot have a backbone. You will starve as a country, just like a human being will starve if you don't have food. So when they knew that Rhodesia was going to be fighting against Africa, the British gave Rhodesia Zisco. South Africa, they knew it was going to fight against the world and Africa. They gave South Africa ISCO. So with those two minerals, with those two plants, South Africa and Rhodesia could tell the world, could tell Africa, go hang. We'll continue to rule as minorities because we are in charge. And no African country had a steel plant. You understand? So when we become independent, the same countries conspire to make sure that Zisco is closed. So we close Zisco. And Bulawayo ceases to be a modern town. I mean, everybody's boss, Bulawayo is culture. It's okay, culture. But you only dance at night after you've been working during the day. You must have jobs during the day. And Bulawayo's fort was a steel town. Belmont and all those places, they were there to produce rolling stock for the railways of Southern Rhodesia, Botswana, Malawi, Mozambique, and DRC. That's what Bulawayo was. So I'm trying to make you understand, appreciate steel. So recently, we set up a steel plant. No government funding. Simply investment. This is the investment ingenuity of President Mnangagwa. The South African plant is closed because it can't compete with ours. Ours is more efficient, the steel quality is higher. So every week, 200 to 300 trucks leave Manise to go and supply all the cars which are being manufactured in South Africa. The steel is now coming from Zimbabwe. Do you see the value chain which we have created amongst ourselves? This is what I was telling South Africans last week on television. To say, forget Zimbabwe about Zimbabwe being a backwater. In certain areas now, in certain sectors, we are now ahead of you. I mentioned the lithium. The president says, let's beneficiate lithium. There is an industrial park in Richards Bay bigger than Santon in South Africa to produce batteries for BYD, for Chery, for Great Wall Motors. I know some of these companies, all of you know Toyota, BMW. Something big is going to come and hit you. Again, the lithium will come from Bikita. The lithium will come from here at Arcadia. This is a world-class product, lithium, for the batteries coming from Zimbabwe. If we make a statement about lithium today, you see it reflected on Bloomberg. You read about it in the Wall Street Journal. You read about it in the Financial Times. Long gone are the day when Zimbabwe was read in the news of the world in London, the tabloids about, they talk about Gukra Hundi, they talk about homosexuals, these were things which Zimbabwe was known about. No, we are being known about things which the world has got a demand for. So these are the value chains which I'm talking about. I've given you the two examples. So if we can have more, like I'm saying, Mozambique produces aluminium. One of the best, the top aluminium factories in the world is in Mozambique. These are the metals which make construction be possible, make planes. So these are the things which we want pursued so that each region can contribute, and we have lots of energy. Mozambique is number 3 in gas in the world very soon. Bigger than, almost as big as Russia and Iran and Qatar. This is Mozambique in Cabo Delgado. There's peace there. No more of that terrorists because Trump doesn't like it. He puts money into northern Cabo Delgado, into northern Mozambique. So Mozambique becomes part of the global value chain in energy. We can build power stations to produce electricity in Zimbabwe using the infrastructure in Mozambique of liquefied gas, built not for Zimbabwe but for the world. But we just pick back. So we have cheap power. With cheap power, we can produce all the Great Dyke. The chrome on the Great Dyke is needed. I want to tell you, we know why the Kariba Dam was built. It was built to supply chrome smelters in Kwekwe and Gweru, because America needed steel, carbon steel, because chrome makes carbon steel. This building, to stand what it is today, beyond one story, you need steel. That's carbon steel, it's chrome. And Zimbabwe has got 700 kilometers from Gwanda to Shamfa of Great Dyke chrome. It needs power. Can you imagine how many blast furnaces, how many smelting furnaces will be all the way from Gwanda to Shamba if we get cheap power from Mozambique and we supply the world with chrome for making steel? That's part of the global value chains we are talking about. These are the issues I'm talking about. And there's an opportunity which will change this story from being a story of vice about xenophobia to a story of virtue about shared Ubuntu African destiny. Those are the value chains at stake. And that's what I think our young people need to be told, that there's an opportunity in your sub-region. We change the template and we change the narrative by giving the region a new sense of opportunity. And we sell opportunity on the global stage, not selling internecine strife, tribalism, xenophobia, Afrophobia. These are negatives. We don't need that. Africa doesn't need that. Another question? No, I'll go to Ndari today. I heard one of these, our young people, if the president is we'll go and snatch somebody on the stage and do this and that. No, this is hyperbole from young people. The president's stage is administered by the security agencies of the country. There is a very competent authority. The people don't just rush the stage of the president. But this is enthusiasm of young people. I'm now talking about social media. Don't make social media be driven by things of no consequence. The stuff which I'm talking about today is the real the stuff which you owe to Africa as journalists. Because this is what will make Africa be what it is. And it will make your profession be proud and be useful. But mukaita dzikirwa futi ku social media kundari zvizoiti by murishashakai. You are cut above those people. We want you to sell a good story about Africa. We will have our own destiny, our own encounter with destiny as Africa. Don't doubt. One day we will have an encounter with the destiny, and this is the way to go. And I count upon you to take that direction in teaching Africa as the fourth estate, where we can go. We don't have to make ourselves the whipping boys of other regions. Thank you so much. I'll still be okay. I hope my Magari who is there today? Okay. We can go and share some. Okay, that's fine. I'm happy. Any questions before I go? Thank you so much for your patience and your attentiveness.